Welcome to the May 6th Eclipse OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation just so we know who's been attending the calls. The link to this agenda is found in the planning channel on the OpenJ9 Slack. So I'll pause here as usual and just give everyone a chance to add any questions they may have or any comments they want to bring up at this point. Daryl, you're lined up to do a lightning talk on the AR64 part.
Yep.
All right, then I will stop sharing and you can take control then.
Sure. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about some work that we released a couple of weeks ago now with the OpenJ9 0.20.0 release. So this is an early access AR64 port for OpenJ9. What we did was we put together a native version, a native support for ARM AR64 and Linux. This is for JDK 11 at the moment. It is early access at this point. It is certainly functionally capable and can do a lot of things and has got very good quality. There are a few things that we need to work on still to make it production ready for various environments, but it is certainly more than capable for being used for evaluation purposes. Releasing it as an early access release is an important first step for it to become a first-class platform on OpenJ9. And by first class, I mean comparable to the other platforms that are already there on x86, PowerZ, and we are getting close to being able to take advantage of the same performance and functional features that the other platforms can. So all the benefits that OpenJ9 has for footprint and throughput and startup and all that are very soon going to be available for AR64 as well. From a development point of view, this is the first new processor target since OpenJ9 was open sourced. It builds upon the work that happened in the Eclipse OMR project to produce a backend for AR64 plus the port library changes for interfacing with the operating system. And what this really does is, because it's a new processor target, it demonstrates the adaptability of this technology to be ported to other environments. So AR64 is an important part of this. You know, in the future, I can see us doing other architectures as well. So it's a good point to demonstrate that we're on the right, that we can do this. So what we have available are release binaries available from Adopt OpenJDK. We have two different configurations. We have compressed references, and we've also got a large heap configuration. So you can download the 0.20.0 release from there. I have links in a slide coming up. If you are, as I said, we are continuing to work on this as like post 0.20.0. And if you really want to get the leading edge builds of the things that we are working on, you can download those as well. We have tested the early access builds on a variety of different devices, from very small devices up to very large configured bare metal servers. It performs very well on all those environments. And it is at the point where it is suitable for a functional evaluation in environments that you care about. So if you are interested in trying this out in some small embedded environment that has a particular footprint requirement, then this is certainly something that you want to give a try. We have a number of things that are still ongoing as we go forward from this release. So some of the things that are being worked on at the moment, and some of the things that we will be working on, but JDK 14 support is something that we are currently doing. We have run a number of the tests with JDK 14, And we are just working through some of the failures that have occurred. Things are looking reasonably well at this point, but there's a couple of things that we need to address, and we're doing that. As we were doing the development over the past couple of years, we have had the occasional inquiry about JDK8 support. So with that in mind, we're going to identify how much work it's going to be to port this back to JDK8. JDK8 would be interesting just because it would round out all the platforms that it'll basically complete all the platforms there as well. So we'll have 4 processor targets there. So we have an issue open here where we're going to start tracking some of the investigation work. We actually have already started this a few months ago. There were some issues that we obviously have to address, and I think as part of this effort, we're going to have to actually just tackle them. So if you're interested in following that investigation, follow that issue. The main piece of work work that really needs to happen in order for this to become a sort of a production quality release is to improve the performance of it. The JIT that's there right now is functional, but it does need more work. We have a number of features that are being developed at the moment that are going to get us much closer to that goal. Recompilation is perhaps one of the most important ones that we're doing right now. We have global register assignment, which we just recently finished, and I think we've got that enabled very soon. And also improving the communication between the compiled code and the VM to basically optimize those paths are things that are very low-hanging fruit for us to get some very good performance. So we're hoping to land some of those features over the next few weeks. Longer term, we want to look at supporting some of the other garbage collection policies as well. So balanced and concurrent scavenge require work in the JIT in order to operate. And then there are a number of other features that need to be implemented in the JIT to make it comparable with the other architectures and put it on equal footing there. I've started an issue there maybe a couple of years back on OpenJ9 to really talk about some of the differences between that JIT and or the various backends and the work that needs to get done to basically harmonize all the work there. So there's a number of issues in that issue that talk specifically about AArch64. So we need to make sure that we complete all those tasks as we go forward. The other goal of all of this work as well is to actually make AArch64 a production-ready, non-early access release. So to that end, we have to address a number of issues still. There were a few issues that we had to defer from 0.20.0 that we need to tackle. And then we need to basically prevent any tests from being excluded as part of the runs. Some of the tests that we excluded were because some features were not available yet. So for example, the balance policy wasn't ready yet or isn't ready yet. So we had to exclude some tests for that. But as we complete all the functional features that we know that we need to complete, mainly in the JIT, then some of those tests can be re-enabled. And then we're going to want to start a performance investigation as well, measure startup time, throughput, GC footprint, all the things that are that OpenJ9 is known to be really good for. And then looking beyond Linux, there has been some interest expressed in Windows. So that is something that we haven't really looked into much at all, but it is something that's interesting for this project, and we will certainly give that a look to see how much work it's going to be to port that. Always looking for community involvement. So if you're interested in evaluating the binaries, by all means, you can download them from Adopt OpenJDK. If you want to follow the night-to-night changes that we're making, you can download the nightly releases as well. And we're always open for feedback. So if you want to provide it in the OpenJ9 Slack workspace, or you can create an OpenJ9 GitHub issue, either way, we'll hopefully address any issues that you have or any feedback that you have. Also looking for help on the development side as well, if you are interested in diving deeper into the implementation. So if you do want to somehow jump onto something, by all means, we've created a bunch of issues in OpenJ9 that are tagged with AR64 and help wanted. So do a query like that I have here, and you can certainly find a number of issues that and pick one that might be of interest to you. So that was a quick intro to AR64 on OpenJ9. I'll stop here and take any questions.
Thanks, Daryl. Do you have a question for you around the shared classes cache support and AOT, whether that's enabled in this build yet or if that's coming in the future?
It is enabled. We've had some issues with a little bit tricky to explain, but we've had some issues with some of the compiler options and getting AOT code into the shared classes cache. We think that those will be resolved once we have implemented recompilation, which is coming, I think, any day now. The shared classes cache by itself should be fully functional. There are some issues, unless you use the quick start option, in getting AOT code into the shared classes cache. But that'll be resolved, I believe, once we get recompilation working in the next couple of days or so.
That's great to hear.
Have you worked with any of the people at ARM in order to look at optimizing any of the things in this port, or have you been working fully independently so far?
We've been working independently, but we've been working in the community. So this hasn't been a sort of a stealth project at all. It's been very much out in the open for the past couple of years. We haven't had any contact with anyone at ARM, though, that I'm aware of.
You mentioned the possibility of a Windows on ARM port. How difficult do you think that would be to achieve? Presumably, now that you've got Windows support and ARM on Linux, it ought to be relatively straightforward to merge the two, I guess.
There are some, I don't think it'll be overly difficult to do. I think there are some, obviously there's going to be some work. I think most of the work is going to be in the compiler itself, the JIT itself. The port library is supposed to make it easy to do that kind of transitioning between operating systems. So I don't anticipate at this point it being a huge amount of work, but that issue that I linked there, the proper sizing for it. Sure. If I had to guesstimate something, I would say it would be on the order of weeks rather than months.
Okay, thank you. Have you considered doing a 32-bit ARM port at all?
So a lot of the code that we need for 32-bit ARM is already there in OpenJ9 and in Eclipse OMR. So it is sitting there. It is somewhat dormant, though. I think the bulk of the work for 32-bit ARM would really be to blow the dust out of all of that and to try to get it to work again. It's certainly possible to do. It's just a matter of prioritizing that work. So if somebody wishes to undertake that work in the community, that's, it may not be, a lot of the work has already been done. So it's really just a matter of getting all those pieces to work together again. So it's on the list. It's just unfortunately low on the list.
Okay, that's fine. I wasn't sure if it was even on the list because I don't know if there was an issue for it or anything. Possibly not. Okay, thanks.
Generally, we've avoided adding new 32-bit platforms where possible. unless there's a really strong need to add a 32-bit platform. Most hardware and most devices are going 64-bit these days.
Yeah, true, but most of, for example, the Raspberry Pis, a lot of hobbyists use it at the moment are still running a 32-bit operating system fundamentally, so won't run the 64-bit binaries. They're capable of running the 64-bit, but it's not what Raspbian is by default, for example. And those are the sorts of devices that could potentially take significant advantage from the lower memory footprint of OpenJ9, was what I was thinking.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daryl, for giving this talk. And I know you're around on Slack and in the community, so if people want to reach out and connect with you, there's a number of ways to do that.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Dan.
If you want to stop sharing, I'll take over again. Okay. So that puts us up here, and just a reminder that next week we'll have a lightning talk from Sophia and Shelley around GitHub actions that they've been developing at Adopt, and some of the actions that we can potentially be taking advantage of in OpenJ9 as well. So take a quick look at the recent user-raised issues next. There was an issue around UTF encoding in JNI, where our behaviors according to spec. The GAC has proposed creating a new JNI check mechanism to validate the encodings are what they should be and as expected. The next one is an issue that was brought to our attention around annotation processing, and it's being investigated. There's some good discussion happening there. The third one here, the VM crash during method compilation, only happens when the verifier is disabled. So when they've re-enabled the verifier, the problem goes away. So at this point, likely to close that issue. This feature request is, I haven't seen before, the enhance JExtract to package DTFJ jars. So we should get somebody to take a look at this and make sure that we're responding to that. Lucene Solar one, again, there's been some good discussion around that as well, addressing another crash. This Kubernetes issue I've added to the agenda so that we can talk about it in the any other business section. And then a request to convert no class def found errors so that the output strings that we give back have slashes in them rather than dots. So something to determine whether that's fairly straightforward and whether we want to add an option for that kind of behavior. In terms of the other ones here, a number of them are being investigated. Is there anyone here that anyone wants to call out or thinks needs some attention and isn't getting it? Right. We will jump back to the agenda. Andrew, have you had a chance to update the graphs?
Yes, they've been updated. The OpenJ9 trend is continuing nicely. If you look closely, actually, the 11 is improving, going up slightly faster. So that's good to see. Still hoping to get the new adopt tracking APIs. Hopefully, at least the API is running next week, so we'll be in sync with the proper adopt download counts.
Any questions for Andrew around this? Thank you for the update, and we'll move down to the release review. Just a reminder that we do have the retrospective here. So if you do have concerns around how the last release went or things that you thought went really well, feel free to add them in here. We'll take a look at them again and see what we can do to be addressing any of these concerns. In terms of upcoming releases, we have the 021 release targeted to July. So there's a link to the milestone plan there and the expected code split date of June the 7th, which gives us basically a month at this point to be burning down that list of issues in that milestone. So just continued request that this is the focus for committers and contributors over the next little bit, is trying to burn down the issues in that milestone plan, particularly the ones that either moved out of the 020 release or are user raised or are segfault issues. So just asking for continued focus on that to burn that list down. In terms of the adopt update, Shelley, do you have an update?
A brief one. A new support issue just came in this morning around OpenJ9 hardened runtime support not signed properly. I put a link there to the issue, hoping someone will take a look from the OpenJ9 team. It appears to only happen on the XL version, or that's what's been reported. But again, it's fairly new. Doesn't seem to be the case for the hotspot stuff. Smart parallelization changes have now been delivered, and we're going to plan the rollout to the open projects over the next couple of weeks. At the OpenJ9 project, the special system tests are already using that with a parallel equal to subdir setting. Next up will be the external tests at adopt, switching to use that mechanism. And then we'll start to roll out the parallel equals dynamic for all of the mainstream testing, like the OpenJDK, the functional, and the system testing. If people don't know what this is about, we've done a few demos in the Aquavit meetings. These are the public open testing meetings that we have, and we'll be doing another one next week. For anyone who needs to catch up on what that means. And I guess the only other point I was going to bring up today was we've been through the retrospective for April. I think one of the main points that comes out of it, and I wanted to bring it up here because I think it also affects OpenJ9, is what actions can we do immediately that would help us reduce the need for respins, because the April release saw around 6 different events or issues that caused the need for respins. So 2 of them were related to the debug info. We'll say some binaries that still contained debug info, so that was on AIX. Some that did not, so that was OSX. There was the respin for the new SSL version, but at least that one was known ahead of time. That was already something we were all aware of, so we knew a respin would be needed a week later because that's when that version would be available. So in those cases, number 3, that's a reasonable thing because we know to plan for it. And then I guess that there were 3 other ones that I can cite. I'm going to be outlining what an actual release is, a release object at the Adopt project. It's much bigger than just building an SD or a JDK and a JRE and testing it. Obviously, we build installers, we create and push Docker images. So we need to make sure that that's all captured as part of our release and that we have automation in place for that. But I will say that based on that, changes like the debug info that came in a week before a release week, I think we're going to have to be fairly cautious and fairly thorough if we want to pull those in. But I just wanted to bring up that the fallout of the retrospective from the April release will probably help us in the long run automate and become better at this releasing. I think the follow-on to that will be, I know there's an OpenJ9 issue around interim releases and potentially on a monthly cadence. Obviously, if we're going to do that at the Adopt project, that means we better harden up what we're doing, because otherwise it's far too costly. So some of this work will have to happen in order to accommodate any new cadence that might be proposed. So that's what I had, if people have questions. And Stuart, I don't know, maybe you have other items you wanted to add in.
Nothing in particular, I don't think.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a thank you to Stuart for the help that he's been providing with getting the Risk 5 builds up and running on Adopt as well.
Oh yes, forgot about that. Yes. Yep, that's good. Yeah, we're having some problems testing it at the moment, but yeah, working with the developers, trying to get through that. So hopefully it'll be good soon. For those that don't know, we've got a sort of, it's not part of the main build pipelines yet, but we've got a separate job in the Adopt OpenJDK Jenkins instance that does build it on a regular basis, and it's been reasonably stable from a build perspective.
Yeah, just that build is interpreter only at this point. We'll be looking to extend that later.
Yep, which is another sort of thing related to what Daryl said earlier about the code base being relatively portable. That is another platform, obviously, that has proven that out.
In terms of the machine update, Joe or Adam, is there an update?
Well, I can talk about to the AIX update. CMake needs to be rolled out to the AIX machines. The one via package installer does not work. So we have also not been able to track down where to post on the IBM forum for this particular toolkit anymore. So Devin has graciously supplied us a compiled binary that works fine on the OMR machines. So I'm going through and actually doing the documentation and pushing a change to Adopt right now, so they know what to do with it too. Both as a binary and how to compile it from source, if someone was so inclined. Basic Artifactory utilization has dropped significantly over the last week by about 8%. Let's see, we were also having some issues with incorporating the second Artifactory server, which I don't see Adam on, but I know he's been testing and trying to get it enabled. There's only 1 or 2 machines it's failing on, and my last update was that we didn't know why it was failing on just 1 or 2 machines. So investigation still ongoing for that before we roll out to all the machines and enable. And that's it.
Unrelated to the machine problem, Dan, this seems to be saying that the CMake builds are bigger than the other builds, which is a concern that we should take a look at.
Yes. How much bigger? Do we have an idea on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just reading what was written here. It's something I hadn't realized before.
That was an issue with some of the split debug stuff. I had the split debug, but it was missing the JIT. It was still getting embedded debug info in there. And so that caused the JIT to be like 500 megs when it was uncompressed. So that fix went in not that long ago. So I believe now that the builds are comparable in size.
Okay, so that might be why last Friday Adam was noticing that the failure rate dropped drastically. It just suddenly started appear to be working across most of the machines. Okay, that's good to know. I'll mention it to Adam to check the size on the binaries again.
Sue, is there an update in terms of the website?
This is Peter Hayward. I don't think Sue's on the call, but following last week's demonstration, I think we're virtually ready to go live with it. And we just need some approvals, which will be asked for in the next couple of days. We've just been fixing one or two niggly things, but apart from that, it's pretty much ready to go.
Thank you. In terms of any other business, Devin, do you have an update on the CMake progress?
Yeah, so I'm working along, squashing the last few test failures we're seeing with OSX, and working to get then the nightly builds on the Jenkins. I'm looking to get that done probably by the end of the week. Then kind of a week of catching any other problems. So looking at making CMake the default on like the 19th.
So that's the reminder to everyone that if you have comments or concerns with this migration process, please raise them either here or probably preferably in the issues so we can keep track of them and making sure that they're getting completed.
So we need to turn on the testing for CMake in the OpenJ9 builds in the open and make sure they're passing before we do any switchover.
Yeah, so I'm working on, so I'm running some of the tests internally and squashing the last few problems and hangs before I go and enable that on the open Jenkins.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Devin. Mark, do you have an update on the interim release proposal? Just looking here, I don't see Mark on the call. So just a reminder that if anyone has any other feedback on that, to please add that in. I think Mark's been working towards a potential date for this. He was going to give us till the end of the week, to May 1st, to express objections to moving forward. Given I haven't heard anyone express that objection, I think we're probably going to proceed to take this to the adopt community.
Yeah, and Mark did mention or message me yesterday as how to bring that over as a proposal. So the process is he'll create a TSE issue. It'll get discussed. It's already been casually discussed, and that's why I mentioned today in the update that we definitely need to harden up some of our release process first before we would switch to a more regular cadence. So there would be some technical work that I think the adopt project would want to do first, but Mark's next step is creating a TSE issue over there.
And the other one here, added on behalf of Raghu, was a proposal around Kubernetes and OpenShift deployments. So Raghu, do you want to give us an update on this?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yes, so we know the deployment technologies have progressed a lot, and I think I was thinking it makes sense to add in new deployment options for OpenJ9. So I've opened an issue. Basically, it involves a support for deploying to Kubernetes based clusters, or even operator-based clusters for OpenShift, given that's the open distribution of Kubernetes plus some additional features. To this one, Dan asked some questions on what's Helm chart, why is Helm chart important, and what are the operator features we are thinking about. What happens is Helm chart is very general and it can be used to deploy to any Kubernetes cluster. So if there are multiple distributions of Kubernetes, different vendors, we can deploy OpenJ9. If we support Helm chart, we can deploy OpenJ9 on any of them without making much of a change, even actually without making any change. All they need to do is basically get a Helm installed on their cluster and deploy OpenJ9. The other thing is operator is, even though is a Kubernetes construct, it's more it's sort of a basic feature in OpenShift 4. It's basically a way of deploying to OpenShift 4, but operator can use Helm chart as a way to deploy while operator runs along with the actual application server or anything that is being deployed. As Dan said, to do the day 2 operations. What I was thinking is just to get started, a basic support for Helm chart based deployment for both OpenJ9, and we also have the JIT server. That way people can deploy OpenJ9 as just as any OpenJ9 application or just OpenJ9 container. I think that it makes sense to start with the adopt OpenJ9 Docker containers we already have. And operators, just the basic operator that can deploy on OpenShift. So our operator to begin with can be only a mechanism to deploy to OpenShift 4, and then as MVP, minimum viable product, then we can add more through iterations, other features through iterations. This is what I was thinking. If there are any questions or anything on it, I can answer. Hello?
Thanks for the introduction, Raghu. I think people are going to probably take a little bit of time to think about this. So, and maybe the best way to move forward it would be to have a discussion in the issue. Now that you've sort of talked about it a bit and presented it, it might make sense to bring this back again next week. Now that people have had a chance to think about it, and maybe follow up with any comments and concerns in the issue in the meantime, and we can sort of present where we've gotten to over the course of the next week on the next call.
Yeah,
that works for you.
I will answer put these details in the issue.
All right then.
Yeah.
Is there any other business people want to raise today? All right, then we'll have the next one of these calls on May the 13th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.